Now, to tell us more about that cryptocurrency surge amid the pandemic, we have with us Jimmy Nguyen, founding president of Bitcoin Association, and we speak to him straight from Mexico. Good morning, Jimmy. Nice that you could join us this morning, this Christmas day. So, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you and all the Philippines.
Okay, safe to say there was a bit of a Santa rally here. You have a Bitcoin again on a tear, reaching all-time high, leading to Christmas here, even reaching over 24,000. What has been driving this rally?
The current price spike of Bitcoin has been driven by a trend started by some public corporations in the United States, led by MicroStrategy, a business intelligence firm, and Square, buying up large amounts of Bitcoin to treat as a reserve asset. And that has led many other corporations and institutional investment funds to really buy up large amounts. They're buying big amounts of Bitcoin, parking it as a reserve asset in a treasury, hoping it goes up in value and withstands inflation of fiat currencies better. So, for example, MicroStrategy in the United States has bought up over 1.1 billion US dollars worth of Bitcoin, over 70,000 coins in the form of Bitcoin BTC. And interestingly, the company, for a public company, this was an unusual and questionable move in my view, recently got 650 million US dollars raised through a debt offering to buy up more Bitcoin. So that is what is driving the price. It's not the everyday person that sparked the price rise in buying up Bitcoin. It's these big corporations and institutional investors.
Jimmy, would you say that this perception of Bitcoin as a good reserve asset is somehow a bit on the downside here when you try to take a look at the generic view, or at least an overall view of how Bitcoin should be performing? Would you say that this is not the right direction, at least for Bitcoin?
Absolutely. I think it's unfortunate. It's great for people who are making money off of Bitcoin in the form of BTC now, but it's not what Bitcoin was created to be. The white paper that's very famous that introduced Bitcoin to the world in 2008 described it as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, meaning that it should be used as electronic cash in our daily life by millions, if not billions, of consumers as well as businesses around the world. It did not describe Bitcoin as a store of value, a digital gold system, or a reserve asset. So the strategy which is driving up the price now is by big holders, big companies, not the everyday Filipino or everyday American, to buy Bitcoin and use it in daily life. It's big companies and investment funds buying it and not using it, saving it, keeping it away. And so that's not what Bitcoin was created to be. In fact, the famed white paper described Bitcoin as a solution to make internet commerce payments more efficient, to cost less, to remove the payment processors in the middle, and to allow small casual transactions, meaning that you and I in our daily life should be able to send across the internet small amounts of money, not 100 US dollars, but 10 cents even, very efficiently and quickly. So that's what our association is trying to drive towards, is not this version of Bitcoin, BTC, the ticker symbol that's traded as a store of value. Instead, we support an alternative version of Bitcoin called Bitcoin SV, which we believe more closely aligns to the original vision. And so BSV is designed to scale big, to process huge amounts of transactions that you and I can send very cheaply, instantly across the world. So on our network of Bitcoin, it costs less than 1/100th of a US cent, which is a fraction of a Filipino centavo, to send a transaction anywhere. It's designed for all of us around the world to use for all of our daily casual transactions, as well as big transactions.
Well, at least that, of course, at least on your end, is what you think should be the direction for Bitcoin here. But really, when you try to take a look at this rally, much of it, safe to say, is really driven by like what you mentioned, by institutional investors. But given that, how much of Bitcoin's future price is in the hands of institutional investors?
At this point, I think a significant portion, if not the majority, of Bitcoin's future price, at least in the form of BTC, is in the hands of institutional investors. They started this price rise. I think some retail investors are coming in because people have that, fear of missing out, FOMO, and unfortunately start buying Bitcoin when the price is rising. I think that is somewhat unfortunate. It's not what Bitcoin was created to be. I have no problem with institutional investors coming into the market, but Bitcoin was meant to be used by everyone. It wasn't
Okay.
meant to be an asset class that large holders controlled the price of. And I think that is what is happening and is the at least near-term future of Bitcoin in the form of BTC, that something could
Mhm.
change with Bitcoin in the form of BSV.
All right. Well, focusing on Bitcoin's BTC as well, should we expect 2017 scenario once again when crypto reached highs as well, new highs, only to fall to new lows? Is this a level, at least what we're seeing now? Do you think it's going to be sustained? And how is this run up different from what we had a few years back?
I think the current price rise of Bitcoin will probably continue in the form of BTC for some time, but I do not think it is long-term sustainable. And here's why. I believe Bitcoin is a commodity. It's a digital commodity in the form of data, the most valuable commodity of our digital economy. But a commodity and an asset should have real value because it has real utility. As I explained, the current trend is for big institutions to buy up large amounts of the coins and not use them, not make them useful in daily life. So over the
Hmm.
long term, I don't think this price rise is sustainable. I don't think you'll see a sharp price collapse as quickly as we saw in 2017, when the price rise was driven more by retail investors. But I think long term, the significant price rise we're seeing now of BTC is just not sustainable because there's no real utility in the coin. People are not using BTC to pay for things in daily life. They're not using the blockchain that powers BTC for data transactions. If it's not used, you have to ask yourself long term, where's the value? And I think that's
Hmm.
why BTC's price will not be sustainable at its current levels.
Okay, to be clear, you're not expecting a collapse like what we saw in 2017, but you're seeing a downtrend that is happening in the future. Am I right?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if BTC continued to rise for some time, but long term, as I mentioned, an asset should have usefulness, utility in order to be valuable. And I think that the current price is just not sustainable.
Okay, but what are the risks here, Jamie? I mean, of course, cryptocurrency is still pretty much perceived as a volatile asset class. So, at the same time, how are traders establishing Bitcoin's price?
That's a very good question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I think traders are establishing Bitcoin's price based on speculation and hypothesis right now. It's certainly not based on, for example, a high volume of transactions happening, adoption happening in the everyday market where Filipinos or Americans are using BTC to pay for our everyday groceries or gas at the gas station. That's not happening. The BTC network is not being used for data transactions or smart contracts, for example, like the Ethereum network is trying to do. So the price that's being established is all based on a hope of value in the future. It's based on the idea that Bitcoin can be a store of value like digital gold. But if you're storing value and there's no inherent value in the asset, I don't think there's any actual fundamental basis to the price. And that's why I question the current price rise of BTC.
Okay, you were mentioning earlier a lot of other uses for the Bitcoin blockchain here, but do you think there has already been somehow a shift in how Bitcoin is perceived or at least used, given, of course, when we entered the pandemic?
I think the pandemic of COVID has drawn attention to the need for a more cashless society, right? So that we are taking less risks with our health in not using physical cash and currency or even payment cards. And so that's good for Bitcoin and digital currency generally. For the BTC network, unfortunately, the people who took control of the network have crippled its capacity to handle large volumes of transactions. It only does 7 transactions on chain per second right now, which is nowhere near the Visa or MasterCard levels of 2 to 50,000 transactions a second. That's what we're trying to solve on Bitcoin BSV by scaling much bigger to handle thousands and thousands and one day millions of transactions a second so that you can use Bitcoin in daily life with a mobile wallet, for example. We want to bring, for example, financial inclusion and create financial services for people in the Philippines where 70% of Filipino adults are unbanked. By having a Bitcoin wallet, if you can use it at fast speed for very
Mhm.
small payment transaction fees, then you can send money, especially remittance, for example, across international boundaries for very, very cheap. As I mentioned on Bitcoin SV, less than Filipino centavo to send a transaction. On the BTC network now, it can cost $7-8 to send a transaction, which is not what you would use in daily life. So I think the pandemic draws attention to the need for a more cashless society. We're trying to bring a Bitcoin world where that's happening, not the BTC world where big holders buy up the coins and do not use it as part of a cashless society.
Given that, what do you think would then it take for at least a Bitcoin to actually get to that level in 2021?
Very simple, scaling. Because if you do not allow huge numbers of transactions on the Bitcoin network, you cannot power a payment system or a data transaction system of this scale. Here, I'll give you an example. Just a few days ago, the island nation of Tuvalu in the South Pacific announced that it was going to be using the Bitcoin SV blockchain, our version of Bitcoin, to power a completely paperless society in its small country and move all of its government records, ID system, and payment system to a national digital ledger, which is powered by Bitcoin SV. So it's using the Bitcoin blockchain to power money, data, identity. And if we can move all of that data to the Bitcoin blockchain, then you can have a very powerful system that makes everything safer for health and avoiding COVID-19 and other viruses, but also empowering our data that we have in our daily lives with monetary value. And that's what ultimately Bitcoin is. It's the fusion of data, bit, plus money value, coin. And blockchain is kind of like the new internet. It allows us to send data. I could send you, for example, an image file, my Instagram picture, and we can attach money value to it so that people can pay me small amounts of Bitcoin to like it, to comment on it. And it creates this much more powerful system if we allow it to scale big. That is what has not happened in Bitcoin's history with BTC and what we're trying to fix with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin SV version.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Jimmy. Again, Bitcoin reaching new heights there, but still so much work to be done, at least for us to properly make use of the digital currency. Again, thank you very much, Jimmy Nguyen, founding president of Bitcoin Association. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.